I'm talking today to Mark Davies, who is the CEO of Esoko. How did this idea come about, Mark?
Esoko started about 4 or 5 years ago in a conversation with TechnoServe when I was particularly interested in what rural businesses in Africa were doing and what were the challenges facing them. We sat around in a room and the first thing that somebody said, farmers need prices. And so I started looking at what kind of solutions were out there and realized that different development partners and agricultural projects were getting into a business that I was a bit familiar with that is quite challenging, and that is software. And I thought there was an opportunity for us to build a software platform that many countries could use at a cheaper rate than if they built it themselves. And that was the essence of the start.
And the platform is somewhat more complicated than just agricultural pricing, isn't it? Give us some flavour of the...
I think it started, or we think of market information systems 1.0 being just price information over SMS, generally provided as a public good by government. I think that's how we started. Since we've been in the space talking to stakeholders, not just farmers, but also governments, farmer associations, private businesses, processes, and so forth, we've realized that there's a range of different information that people need. They need to know the weather, they need to know who's buying and selling, not just what the prices are, they need to know what stock levels are. There's a much broader range of information that's required. And it's not only that people push information out, in fact quite the reverse. One of the things I think we've understood is that it's about acquiring market data. It's about understanding what's happening within your supply chains. Who's planted? Where is the product? What is the stock? And I think the real understanding for us is that you can build solutions on a mobile network to help people more affordably acquire that information and improve the efficiencies of the supply chains. So in a sense, we're a kind of media company, mobile media company, and getting less interested in the particular kind of content that you use, but just giving tools to people to move it around.
And how do you acquire data?
Well, there's two ways. In the start, since I think nobody is using this at all, it's almost like the early days of the internet, you have to seed the content. And certainly one of the challenges in Africa right now for most of us is that digital content, on the one hand, there's plenty of digital content, but for the kinds of content like market prices, there's very little of it, so you have to create it.
Yeah, there's no specialist content, is there?
No.
To speak of?
So there's a lot of Facebook content now, a lot of email content, but in terms of structured content that has been pulled together, that has been editorialized, if you will, very little of that. So we, in Ghana, where we're running the operations, we have 34 markets covered, and we actually send people out to acquire that content and to submit it into the system. The second way you can acquire content, and I think the goal for many internet companies is for users and businesses themselves to generate content. So if you give the tools to somebody to inform their suppliers and their processors and their distributors and ask them questions, then just like Facebook, the system itself, the platform itself, in a way, is creating its own content. And so we're trying to balance those two sources of content, and we're not entirely sure how successful we'll be, or whether we have to do more of our own content, or whether businesses are willing to share, or whether they want to keep it private, but that's the approach.
I think one of the transitions between version 1 and version 2 is that the client base becomes more complicated. In the early versions, it was the putative sharecropping farmer working a small piece of land who would look at his mobile, but actually you're now talking about all elements of the supply chain. Give us some sense of that.
Sure. I mean, I think that everybody's moving information around. And honestly, I think the opportunity just grows if not every month, certainly every quarter, and moves beyond what we had traditionally thought about in agriculture to, we now have some projects in health that are looking to do. I mean, basically, just as you and I have seen in our own lives, in our own businesses, and in more developed economies, businesses and lives transformed through the cheap and affordable and quick movement of information. The same applies to rural business, particularly informal businesses where it's actually very expensive to move information around, and very few people have structured sources of and tools and computers and so forth. So we've expanded it out much more beyond the farmers, partly because farmers are difficult to reach. And as we were debating and looking at this space, many businesses approached us and said, well, we'd like to use the tools that you're developing. We want to send out our own prices or our own messages. So now we have processors interested, we have warehouse managers interested, we have fertilizer companies interested, we have governments interested, we have extension departments interested, we have associations interested, we have health organizations interested. I think we could probably sell this to just about anybody. So in the same way that a product like Frontline has been so successful as a simple tool providing a very focused functionality, I think that we, in a similar way, are applicable to many different kinds of groups and organizations.
So in terms of the technical side of it, how is it delivered? How will I be able to use all the information that's on the Esoko platform?
Well, it's a cloud service that is to some degree channel agnostic. We don't really care whether you're interacting with us through a computer, through a mobile phone on SMS, through a feature phone with Java, or through a smartphone with Android, or through another person via voice. It's in some ways a slightly more complex and nuanced delivery channel than you and me sitting in front of just our computer at home. So I could be profiled by my business, by my association. I could tell them what I'm interested in, what I trade in, what markets I work with, and then I simply receive SMSs on my phone 2 or 3 times a week with hopefully pertinent and useful information. So it's very passive, at least from the farmer's point of view, where they receive this information tailored, personalized to them in an SMS format that they can use to make better decisions.
And you've been piloting the service, and now you've launched it in Ghana. Tell us who the launch is aimed at and what progress has been so far.
Well, I think part of it is about establishing the brand and the credibility of the company on a broader scale. I mean, we've been doing our own little efforts, but people didn't know who we really were and what we were trying to do. We have 2 or 3 different target audiences that we're facing. On the one hand, we've got the consumer market, farmers out there. The launch and the marketing campaign isn't really targeted at them. That is going to take going into those markets, into those communities, ourselves touching them in a way to be able to share that information and that value proposition. The campaign that we've started right now is known as There's a Better Way, and it's targeted at businesses, projects, ministries, development partners that are looking at transforming how agriculture is managed in these communities and how you can make it more efficient. So there's a better way to get information. There's a better way to get data from the field. There's a better way to find buyers and sellers. So there's a better way. And we're really saying, look, there's a lot of hype about mobile. There's a lot of projects out there. This is one that has really been thinking about it for 4 or 5 years, that has done a little bit of work within the market itself, has demonstrated some impact, and is really a good partner if you're looking at improving how you manage these supply chains.
You have a presence in several other African countries. Just run us through what the presences are elsewhere.
We've got, we're in about 15 different countries. None of them are the same. They're all very different. In some cases, we've got what we consider to be a sort of full-fledged franchise where they're looking at rolling out a market information system as a business and where they sell subscriptions. That's our model. And we here in Ghana would take a percentage of the subscriptions they sell. That's effectively our model. In other cases, we've got development partners, projects, USAID-funded projects that are looking at particular value chains to provide interventions, information, better tools for either warehouse managers. In Malawi, for example, it's an MLI program, and they're looking at how do we work with grain bulk storage groups, and how do we help farmers go and store their grain. So there's a broad range. We started very much in West Africa through a USAID MISTOA program in 6 countries, looking at intra-regional trade, and now we're beginning to get a little bit more fragmented, smaller associations, individual businesses looking at us and saying, look, I've got 100,000 cotton farmers, I want to inform them, I want to schedule messages to them. So there's a huge range of partners. And I think the interesting part of it is, how do we have a sort of public-private partnership where, since this is so new and it is about behavior change, and that's always difficult, how can we use public projects to help take the risk out of this for businesses and other participants? How can they come in and say, look, why don't you try Esoko for 12 months? We'll help you with capacity building, with the license payment and so forth. And then if it doesn't work for them and it doesn't work for us, fine.
Yeah.
But that's sort of our model.
In 5 years' time, if it had all worked perfectly, describe to me what the world would be like using Esoko. Give me your sense of...
Well, I think if you can consider the impact of large, short, targeted information services like Facebook, like Twitter, very relevant to you in terms of your social network, very relevant to you in terms of news or gossip. We want to achieve something similar in terms of market information, in terms of commerce. We think in developed markets, perhaps you have a range of ways in which you stay informed. In these markets, as we emerge, it's going to be much more first stage into mobile, feature smartphones, and we want Esoko to really be your first point of call in terms of a broad range of information that will help you make informed decisions with a clear focus on, I think, the original spirit, which was smallholder farmers. How do we really improve their revenue, their access to markets, reduce their risk, but also touching all kinds of trades and businesses. Esoko is my partner, Esoko is where I get that information, my Esoko agent is the one that understands what I'm looking for, and we are sort of just a technology platform that's allowing the facilitation of information between market networks. So as opposed to social networks, we see ourselves as market networks, and that's really where we'd like to be.
There's sort of a deficit in specialist information, isn't there, in Africa and indeed much of the developing world. There isn't this kind of information, simply doesn't exist or is held in a very proprietary way.
Well, I think it's more the latter in a way. There is a lot of specialist information, or what we in the industry call information asymmetry, which is what is concentrated advantage in the hands of a few. And I really think that this is an opportunity to be disruptive. Everyone always wants to have a disruptive technology. It is a perfect situation in a way for technology to disrupt that. And you've now got the broad distribution of terminals and appliances in people's pockets, and nobody's really thinking about how to maximize that. Voice has transformed enormously the situation of many people, but it isn't really very effective if you're looking at going to scale. You can't call 10,000 people, but you can push out content. And so I think that there is specialist information, it is held, we want to disrupt that, we want to change it, we want to give a more easy, more affordable access to many more people.
And to make the markets more transparent.
Absolutely. And I think with more transparent markets, you'll attract more sophisticated buyers, more sophisticated agro-industries into the African environment, and that will create the pull. And that's what I think any of us respond to. If there's a demand for my products, I'm going to grow more. And that's what we'd like to see.
Mark, thanks for talking to me.